Thursday, Tov Tes, here, Erev Rosh 7, Tov Shin Gimel. We're in Teres Menachem, Sefer HaMamorim, Tov Shin Yud Aleph, Tov Shin Yud Beis, in the Maimer of Shabbos Pashas Pinchas, Mevorchem HaChedesh Menachem of Tov Shin Yud Aleph, Dibur HaMaschel Tzav B'nei Yisrael. We are on page Kuf Yud Tes, and we are in the middle of the paragraph starting V'ha'inyan. I think we'll start from there again today. Just to pick up the thread, the Rebbe over here is discussing the concept of karbanos, sacrificial offerings, and their centrality in terms of man's service of Hashem, Avodas Hashem. And he brought a number of questions on this, where it would seem that there are other things that are more important or more central than karbanos, particularly the idea of davening, which we know that davening is in the place of karbanos, but in fact, in davening, the elements or the narrative that's behind an actual physical bringing of a korban is far more pronounced in davening, as the Rebbe explained at length. So therefore, what is this aspiration and this emphasis on bringing karbanos, physical karbanos? And in order to understand this, the Rebbe prefaced it by quoting the famous klal rule in Chassidus, concept in Chassidus, Nis'ava Kadosh Baruch Hu Lias Leis Baruch Dira B'Tachtenim, which is from the Medrash. HaKadosh Baruch Hu desired to have a dwelling place for himself, i.e., for his very essence, down here in this physical world. In all other worlds, although you have Getlachkeit, but they are the godliness, they are revelations of godliness, whereas the very essence of Hashem is revealed, and specifically down here in this physical world. How? Through Avodas Hashem, through the person serving Hashem. And that's where we are up to. Page Kuf Yutes. The Rebbe elaborates more on this idea of drawing down the very essence of Hashem into this physical world through Avodas Hashem, through man serving Hashem. What is the idea here? What is the concept behind this? The Hinik it says in the pasuk in Bereshis, Asher bara Elikim la'asos. We say it in Kiddush every Friday night that Shabbos Hashem rested. Kivay Shabbos mekom malachtoi. On this day he rested from all his work. Asher bara, Elikim, which God created, la'asos, to do. What does it mean he created to do? What does la'asos mean? Amru Razal. So our sages teach in the Medrash, la'asos l'saking. La'asos means l'saking, to fix. What does that mean? That Hashem left over something for man to do as well. V'hainu. And the Rebbe spells it out. In everything that is created, there are two components. Mashahu mitzat atzmai, that which is on its own, meaning to say, as it is, the state in which it is created, that which is added into it through Avodas Adam, through man's effort, through man's serving Hashem. This is true not only in our world, in our physical world, but also in Gan Eden, which is higher than the world. The karkois Gan Eden, because the floor of Gan Eden is the spirituality of the physicality of the world. In Gan Eden we have that which is on its own, meaning to say Gan Eden as it is in its own right, in its own state, as it's created. And then there is what man adds into Gan Eden, through what? Through serving Hashem.
What does he mean by the floor of Gan Eden?
He basically, what the Rebbe is saying here is, if I understand it correctly, looking up the references and so on and so forth, that there is a relationship, that the Gan Eden and the physical world are parallel worlds which are connected to each other. Meaning to say that whatever, I mentioned yesterday, the Shiur is like an inverse shadow. Gan Eden is like an inverse shadow of our world. Whatever man does here has a direct impact on what happens in Gan Eden. So there's a connection, which is what? Obviously Gan Eden, and as the Rebbe is going to explain in a minute, Gan Eden and this physical world are inherently different because our world is connected to Midas, as we'll learn in a minute, and Gan Eden is connected to Meichen, to the intellect. And intellect and Midas are not only different, but they are separate in the sense that Midas can only come into being once Meichen is concealed, once the intellect is concealed. Nevertheless, there is that connection. The connection comes through the floor, as it were, through the floor of Gan Eden, meaning to say that the Ruchnius Shebegashmius, right, is what connects the physical world to the spiritual world, our world to Gan Eden. So, even in Gan Eden, we have this idea that of Gan Eden as it is on its own, in its own right, as it is how it is from as it's been created, and then there is that which is added through Avodas Adam, through man serving Hashem. And now the Rebbe begins to elaborate on this, provide some detail. V'inyahu. Just before we go on, I just want to give a short hakdama. I know we don't have much time because it's Thursday and we're davening at 7. But a short preface, just so we can understand a little better what's going on over here. There are 4 Oilams, 4 worlds, 4 realms: Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, Asiya. Right? Each one of these Oilams, each one of these worlds has Esesphiras, 10 divine energies and attributes. However, there is a dominant sphira, or a dominant aspect, which relates to each of the specific worlds. Atzilus is Chochmah. Now, when we talk about all of this, we're talking about Chochmah of Atzilus. What's the dominant feature of Atzilus? Chochmah da Atzilus. Of course, there are the 10 spheres, but the dominant one is Chochmah. Bria is Bina. Bina of what? Bina of Atzilus. It says Eima, there's a lashon in the Kunazer, I think it is. Eima ila'a mekanana betlas sfiron de kursaya. Olam Abri is called Olam HaKisei, the world of the throne. When we're talking about the Kisei HaKavod and the Nevuah of the Yecheskel and so on and so forth, God's celestial throne and so on and so forth, we're talking about Olam Habriya, right? The world of Bria. The dominant sphera in Olam Habriya is Bina. When we say Ema Ilah, the upper mother, we're talking about what? Bina of Atzilus. Is Mekanana. She dwells. Where does she live? Where does she find her expression? In Olam Habriya. Yetzira is Midas, and Asiya is Malchus. That's Yud Kei Vav Kei in Olamis. Yud is Chochmah, Hey is Bina, Vav are the 6 Midas, and the last Hey is
of
Atzilus, and Hey is Malchus.
Also of Atzilus.
Correct. So in other words, each one of these 4 aspects of Atzilus find expression and are dominant in the respective 4 worlds. Chochmah of Atzilus dominates Atzilus. Bina of Atzilus dominates Bria, obviously through Seder Yishtalshalos, but that's the dominant feature there. The Midas of Atzilus are dominant where? In Yetzirah, and the Malchus of Atzilus is dominant where? In Asiya. Yud Kei Vav Kei. Gan Eden, there's a Perek in Tanya, Perek Lamed Tes, which I encourage you to read. Okay, you can take the English text and read it after the Shiur, where the Alter Rebbe explains what is Gan Eden, what happens to neshamas, and he explains that mainly what is Gan Eden. Gan Eden is, and the Rebbe touches on, obviously the Rebbe refers to it over here, but we'll understand more what the Rebbe says by focusing on this. Gan Eden is the reward, right? Over there, the Alter Rebbe explains the idea of schar mitzvah mitzvah, that the reward of the mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. Gan Eden is the reward, meaning to say it's the consequence, just like we know that punishment and reward are consequences of the actual act that the person does, right? So Gan Eden means the pleasure that neshamas have, the ruchnistic and spiritual pleasure, the godly pleasure that neshamas have, resulting from, for example, learning Torah Lishma. Torah for the sake of learning Torah, learning Torah as one should, or doing mitzvahs as one should, right? Where does that pleasure really happen? Where does the neshama truly connect to that tainug in Gan Eden? As the Rebbe will explain here in a minute, that the only place where you have hasagas who's comprehending the essence as opposed to knowing the existence. In this world, it's drier. The internal dimension is concealed. We're focused on the practical aspects of it, and it's difficult to connect to the internal dimension. And even through his bonus and contemplation and so on and so forth, we're limited. We can only get to the stage of what's known as yediyas ametzias, knowing the existence of godliness. But comprehending the essence of godliness, truly appreciating what it is, that happens in Gan Eden, as a result of what the neshama does down here. Ultimately, Gan Eden is in Bria. Gan Eden Atacht, in the lower level of Gan Eden, is generally in Yetzirah. Right? But the ultimate state, in other words, the main Gan Eden, as it were, right? The highest level that one should aspire to is an Elam Abriya. Let's use it. Let's talk about the neshamas. About the neshama, there's nefesh, ruach, and neshama, right? There's chay yechida, which are the external faculties, the hovering faculties of the aspects of the neshama. But nefesh, ruach, and neshama. Ruach, nefesh is the lowest. That's the nefesh that part of the nefesh that inhabits our body, which the functional aspects of it. Ruach is connected to the midas, and neshama is connected to the meichin, to the intellect. A person who serves Hashem with his midas mainly gets to the Gan Eden of Elam HaYetzirah because it's connected to midas. So correspondingly, he comes to the level of Gan Eden of midas, where the dominant features are what? The midas of Atzilus, which is where in Elam HaYetzirah. Someone who serves Hashem with his meichin, the Alter Rebbe terms, the chilu urechimu sichliyim, midas, the love and fear that emanate through contemplation, through comprehension, will end up where? In Elam HaBriyah. The Alter Rebbe goes even further and says that even the neshamas that serve Hashem with ruach, who are usually in Yetzirah, on Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh, they go up through the omud, through the lift that exists between the Gan Edens, and they go up and they have inspiration also from what? From Elam HaBriyah. But normally they'll be in Yetzirah. The bottom line is that the ultimate state of Gan Eden is really and truly where? In Elam HaBriyah, which is connected to Meichin. Why? As we say over here, I just mentioned, what's the dominant sphere of Bria? Bina. Where does Bina of Atzilus? Where does Bina of Atzilus find expression in Bria? Where? In the Meichin of Bria. In the Chochmah Bina Das of Bria, that's where Bina of Atzilus finds its expression. This is more or less the technical setup. Now let's see what the Rebbe says inside. To explain more this idea that what a person does down here in this world also introduces a new feature into what? Into Gan Eden. So he says like this: Gan Eden hu naila yesod ma'olam. Gan Eden is higher than the world. Sharei ha'olam kosher b'chinas hamidos. This world is mainly connected to midos. K'meshekosov ki amarti olam chesed yibana. Hashem says, I build the world with what? With chesed. Meaning to say that the midos, the 6 midos of chesed through Yesod, these are represented in the 6 days of the week, right? V'gan Eden klalusay hu elam habriya. Gan Eden generally is referred to as elam habriya, the world of creation. Shemeir b'chabad, in which what shines, what is illuminated in elam habriya? Chabad, the intellect. God's infinite intellect. Shehu inyan ha-meichin. So, Gan Eden is connected to Meichin, and our world is connected to what? To Midas. V'hina yadua, it is known, sheha-meichin ilamayla min ha-midas. The intellect is higher than the Midas, than the emotions. The emotional the Midas, the attributes that are connected to the emotions. And what does it mean they're higher? And the Rebbe explains. Just like in the physical anatomy of the human being. Between the head and the heart, there is the narrow channel of the neck, of the throat, of the neck. This means to say that in order for there to be able to be the creation of midas, the emotional aspects, the emotional attributes, so that they can come and be created from where? From the meichin, from the intellect. So the tchilis almas ha-meichin means to say that first meichin, the intellect has to be concealed. V'rak oz efshei shetahei mitzias the midas. And only once meichin is concealed, once the intellectual aspects are retracted and concealed, that gives room for midas to come into existence. From this we can understand the tremendous distance between the emotional attributes aspects to the intellectual aspects. For which purpose there first needs to be the contraction and the concealment of what? The retraction and the concealment of the intellectual dimensions and aspects. So the meichin become concealed, and you come into a state where it's not meichin and not midas. And only then the midas, the emotional attributes and aspects, could come into existence.